Today on our 2007 Chevrolet Silverado, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Redarc Tow Pro Elite Proportional Trailer Brake Controller for 1 to 3 axles. Now to help us in our installation, we're going to be using the universal mounting panel for Redarc Tow Pro Brake Controller remote head. And that's going to be part number 331-TP-SI-001. So here's what our Tow Pro Elite Brake Controller looks like once we have it installed. It's going to be an extremely compact unit, and all we're going to see is the knob with the LED light right here. This is going to be a great solution to the traditional style brake controller, which typically do take up a decent amount of space, and they do get kind of cumbersome where they may interfere with your legs while you're driving. Now you'll notice that we have a blue LED indicator light that's on right by our knob, and that's going to let us know that our trailer is connected. But when we don't have a trailer connected, there's not going to be a light on at all. Now, like most brake controllers on the market, we're going to have a knob that's going to adjust the power that we're sending to our trailer brakes. It's going to go all the way from 0, and if we turn the knob, we can go all the way up to 10, 10 being the maximum power. And for those situations where our trailer starts to sway or potentially jackknife, where we need to slow it down but we don't want to slow our vehicle down, we can push on the knob itself, which will act as a manual override, and apply the trailer brakes. And as you can see, with it being on 10, we're going to have a dark red light coming on, which is letting us know that's the maximum power. And if we turn the knob down, we can see that it's going to change colors. And that's going to let us know how much power is getting sent to our trailer brakes. Now, one really unique feature of this brake controller, it is proportional, but we do have the option to go into a user-controlled mode. So if we come to our knob and we go all the way down to 0, and if we apply the vehicle brakes and push the knob twice within 1 second, and then release the brakes, we can see that the knob turns to green. Now, instead of being a slow, proportional ramping up to our braking power, we can set our brakes to whatever portion we need. So if we set them at the maximum and apply the brakes, it's going to apply the full force to the brakes immediately. As well as if we turn it down, it's going to apply the brakes at whatever setting we have it at immediately. And you can see if we go all the way down to 0, it's going to have a green light, and it's going to slowly start changing from green to red with the more intensity that we have applied to the brakes. Now, when we're in user control mode, when we hit the manual override button, it is going to apply the brakes at whatever setting we have it at. So if we have it set towards the middle, it will apply the middle amount of pressure. If we have it set all the way, it's going to apply the full force of the brakes. And then again, very low, it's going to apply a very low amount of braking pressure. And to switch back into proportional mode, we're going to do the same way. You're going to push on the brake and tap the manual override button twice within 1 second and release the brake. And in both modes, if we apply the manual override button and we turn the knob, we can see how much braking force is going to be applied, not only by the number on the knob, but by the color the LED is turning. Now, proportional mode really is meant for everyday driving or highway driving. And no matter where we set it, if we just lightly apply the brakes in our vehicle, it'll slowly apply the brakes to our trailer. Now, the harder we apply the brakes in our vehicle, the harder it's going to apply the brakes in our trailer. Now, in user control mode, our brakes are going to be applied to our trailer at whatever setting we have our gain knob set to, regardless of how light or how hard we push on the brake. This is going to be ideal for off-road applications because we're going to be able to fine-tune the braking pressure to accommodate any of those large hills and make sure our trailer brakes don't come on too soon or not come on enough. Now, unlike a lot of other proportional brake controllers, we're not going to have to level this or make sure it's facing any certain direction because it is going to calibrate itself. You just want to make sure that you have enough room to put the unit itself, and you want to make sure that it's nice and secure and it's not going to change any kind of direction or orientation that it's setting. Our brake controller is going to accommodate trailers that have 1 to 3 axles and that have electric or electric over hydraulic brakes. So if you're looking for a brake controller that's not going to take up a lot of room in your vehicle and not interfere with your legs while you're driving, and give you that smooth proportional braking when you're going down the road, while at the same time being able to fine-tune and adjust in the user control mode for going off-road, our Redarc Tow Pro Elite brake controller is going to be a great option, not taking up a lot of room and having all the features and adjustabilities that we want. So now that we've seen what it looks like and gone over some of the features, let's show you how to get it installed. To begin our installation, we're going to find a spot that we're going to want to mount our bezel for our brake controller, but also be able to access all the wires and the control module itself. So we decided that we're going to mount ours right here at the lower portion of our dash, just to the left-hand side of our steering wheel, right below our four-wheel drive unit. So we're going to go ahead and loosen this panel up. We're going to have a few screws on the bottom that we're going to have to take out. Now on the bottom of the dash here, towards the center, we're going to have one Phillips screw, and then all the way towards the left-hand side, towards the door, we're going to have another one holding that panel in place. So I'm going to grab a Phillips head screwdriver, and I'm going to go ahead and pull those two screws out. Now on the very left-hand side of our dash here, we're going to have our fuse panel cover. So if we come to the bottom section here, we can kind of just give it a gentle tug, and that panel should pop out, making it a little bit easier to start working this panel down so we can get a hold of it. So I'm going to be using a plastic trim panel tool. I'm just going to go in between the top two sections of my dash and start pulling it away. And once you have it broke loose, you can just use your hand and start gently pulling the panel away from the dash to loosen it up. Now we can see what's behind there and see if there's anything that's going to interfere with us mounting our brake controller here. Now for our bezel, we do have to have a little bit of room for the actual connector to come out the back side of it. So we're going to have to watch where we mount it, because back here towards the very left hand side we're going to have our fuse box, and you don't want to cause any damage, and I don't think we're going to have enough room once the panel's back in place. But if we move just towards the four-wheel drive and down a little bit, there's going to be a nice large hole behind the panel. We'll have plenty of room to mount our bezel. Now our mounting bezel is going to come with a template. So I went ahead and cut the template out and taped it to where I'm going to mount it on the dash. So now I can take a drill bit, I'm going to drill out that center hole in my template. Now we're going to want to come back with a 25mm or a 1-inch hole saw and cut out that template on the outer ring. Now when you're cutting with your hole saw, you do want to be careful. You want to make sure that your drill bit isn't going to catch anything on the back side, or that you're going to cause any damage to any wiring or anything else behind there. Now we can remove the paper and the template, and if need be, clean up the edges on our hole that we just cut. So with the hole cut, we go ahead and take our bezel. I'm just going to go ahead and push it into place. And now we can get ready to start running our wires. Now in our bezel kit, it is going to come with some gaskets, and that's going to make it fit a little bit better if your dash is curved, to take up some of that space whenever you put it in. So here's our main unit. We're going to have two connection points that we're going to be using. One on one end that's going to look like a phone cable, and that's going to be for our remote head unit. And on the other end, that's where we're going to get our brake signal wires and our power from. So to make things easier on ourselves, we're going to go ahead and connect our cables now. So we're going to have a 4-pin connector that we can go ahead and plug in. I want to make sure it locks into place. And then on the other side, we're going to have our remote head cable that we can go ahead and plug into our unit as well. Now we're going to need to find a spot to mount our unit, and when you mount it, you want to make sure that it's nice and secure and that it's not going to move around. We can mount it in any position we want, but again, we just want to make sure that it's going to stay stationary in that position and not move. So right by our fuse panel, we're going to have this pocket right here where our main unit's going to fit perfectly. So I'm going to take my wire, and I'm actually just going to kind of feed it through that opening just so they're out of the way right now. Drop them down to the bottom of the dash so I have room to get all my wires and everything in. And take our head unit wires, slide them down, then we can take our main controller wires. I'm going to try to feed them down through the opening in the same area, but the main goal right now is really just to get the wires out of the way so that we can tuck our unit in right here and secure it against the plastic and everything else right here. So it may take a little bit of patience, a little bit of time to route these wires, but in the end, it'll be worth it because it'll be nice and tucked out of the way and nice and secure. So we have our wires connected and we have our unit in place. So now you're going to want to grab some zip ties, maybe put a couple around the bottom pieces here, and if you can, go ahead and put a self-tapping screw right here to keep it nice and secure. Now our unit's going to be nice and secure and it's not going to be able to move. For our remote head unit wire, we're going to want to route this up towards where we mounted our bezel because it's going to be plugging into the back of it. So you can just route the wire up. I'm going to go behind the panel, following the way we came. And if you can, you're going to want to try to go around the factory wiring, making it a little bit easier to get everything in place. And for now, I'm just going to pull all the slack out and drape that cord over the top, and then we can start making our connections with our other wires. Our Silverado is going to have some wiring that's made for a brake controller, and that's going to be underneath the dash. And we're going to have 4 wires that are going to be in a bundle with no connector on it. So in between the emergency brake pedal and the brake pedal, we'll see that we have this bundle of wires here that is held up by some electrical tape. Those are going to be the wires that we're looking for. So we can go and pull them down, just kind of get rid of that electrical tape. And yours may or may not have this legend on it telling you what the wires are. If it doesn't, we'll go ahead and go through and start testing them to make sure that they are correct though. So we'll start off with this red wire with the black stripe. We're going to go ahead and remove the tape off of it and grab a 12-volt tester. And this one should be our 12-volt power source, but we'll go ahead and check to make sure. Now you can see here I'm not getting any power to this red and black wire. So we're going to need to go underneath the hood and make sure that everything's connected. Now if we come underneath our brake booster and our brake reservoir, we'll see that we're going to have a red and black wire with a ring terminal attached. And this is going to be that wire that's going inside to the brake controller wires. So we're going to attach this, which fortunately for us, our fuse box is going to be right here. So we're going to remove the cover. And then we're going to be attaching it to one of the 2 posts right here. So we can bring our wire over. We're going to slide it over the post. It's going to be all the way on the driver's side. Now if we come to the outside of our fuse panel, we're going to have another red wire that's going to be taped to a harness. We can go ahead and pull that out. And this red wire is going to be going to the other side in the other terminal. Now one of these is going to be for our brake controller power, and one of them is going to be for our 12-volt power back at the 7-way. So we can go and grab a few nuts and secure these down. For our larger port, we're going to be using an M8 nut. Just going to make sure you thread that on and secure everything down. And then for the smaller power wire, we're going to be using an M6 nut. Let's get these on there hand tight for now. And using a 10mm wrench, I'll tighten up my M6 nut. And then for my M8 nut, I'm going to be using a 13mm wrench to tighten it up. Now at the very end of our fuse panel towards the front of the vehicle, you'll notice that we have this rather large 30-amp fuse, and that's going to be the power for one of the posts that our power wires are going to. The spot next to it most likely is going to be open. You're going to want to grab a J-case 40-amp fuse, and then we can get that put into place. So now both the terminals that we just put our power wires on will have power going to them. So now that we have power going to our wire, we'll go ahead and double check and make sure that it is receiving it. So our red wire is going to be our constant 12-volt power source. So we're going to go ahead and strip back the end of our wire. You're going to want to grab some heat shrink butt connectors. We're going to crimp ours in place. And then we're going to take the black wire coming from our main unit. We're going to take any kind of insulation on the end off there. And this is going to be the power wire for our main unit. You can go ahead and pull the tab off and slide it into the butt connector. and we can crimp it down. Now the next wire we'll work with is going to be our white wire, which our white wire coming off our main unit is going to be our ground wire. So we can grab another one of our butt connectors. Now this butt connector is going to be a little bit different size just because the wires are smaller. We'll crimp our white wire, and then if we come to our factory harness here, we're going to grab the solid white wire, and that'll be for our ground as well. So I can remove the tape, and since this wire is thinner, I'm going to go ahead and fold it over. We can slide it into our butt connector and crimp it in place. The next wire we'll work with is going to be the blue wire. Now this is going to be for our brake signal output. So again, we can grab one of our butt connectors and crimp it down. And our brake signal output wire is also going to be blue coming off the factory wiring. So again, we can just remove any kind of tape on there, strip back the wire, and crimp it down. Now finally, our red wire is going to be going to our brake switch so that I can get the signal knowing when our brakes are applied. So just to make sure that it's working properly, we're going to take our white wire with the blue stripe. I'm going to take my circuit tester, and what we're looking for is a 12-volt power source only when the brake pedal is depressed. So you can see when I push on the brake pedal, I'm getting a 12-volt power source, but when I let go, I'm not getting any power. So that's going to be the wire coming from our brake switch. So we can remove the tape and strip back the wire and put a butt connector in place. So I'm going to be taking a heat gun to shrink down my connectors. Just want to mention, if you are using an open flame or a torch to shrink them down, you want to be extra careful not to burn or char the wires or the connectors themselves. So next we can take our remote head unit. We're going to slide our panel down, and you'll notice that there's a little LED light at the top. You're going to want to make sure you line that up with the bezel correctly. And we're going to come from the back side, and we're going to slide it into place. And we can go ahead and take our wire, and we can plug it in. Just want to push any of the excess wire out of the way, and we'll plug it directly into the back of the head unit. If you need to, you can go ahead and unplug it, making it a little bit easier to get in place. Then we can reposition everything. Now the remote head unit is going to come with a little mounting nut. You want to make sure that shoulder is facing in. Go ahead and push it into place very gently so it doesn't push the remote out the back. And then we're going to start threading it in hand tight. Now you don't want to over tighten this, but you want to make sure it gets nice and snug to where it's not going to be moving around. Now if we come to the remote, you're going to want to turn that all the way counterclockwise so that it stops in position. Then we can grab our knob. Now around the edge it's going to have different numbers on there. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to line up the number 0 with the LED section that's on our mount right here. You're going to want to get as close as you can without turning the knob any to getting it to line up with 0. And as you can see, it'll line up pretty well. Might be a little bit off, and if you do have trouble getting it lined up, you can just gently kind of pull on that knob again to get it to slide off, and then you can reposition it how you need to. Now we can go ahead and take some time, clean up all of our wires. You want to take any excess and zip tie it up underneath the dash so it's not going to interfere with any of the pedals. And then we can work on putting the panels back in place. And put those screws back in place. And then finally we can put our fuse panel cover back in as well. When we first plug in our brake controller and it's getting power, we're going to have a green and blue flashing light. Until we get the unit calibrated and it figures out the direction of travel, it's going to be in user control mode, which means it's still going to work, but it's not going to have that proportional braking. So we'll still have our override where we can just turn the knob up, we can push the button and that's going to apply the brakes. Or if we have it turned up and we manually push on the brakes, it's still going to apply the brakes for us, but it does need to be calibrated. So we'll go ahead and drive around a little bit and get it calibrated and apply at least about 10 to 15, maybe even 20 brake applications and ease into your brakes so that you have a nice slow stop and then maybe a few sudden stops so that the brake controller can calibrate itself. Now once you hook your trailer back up and you have a solid blue light, you'll know that it's fully calibrated. And that'll finish up your look at the Redarc Tow Pro Elite Proportional Trailer Brake Controller.